Welcome back to the show. Today we're going to be talking with John Claude Bemis, and we're going to be talking about his graphic novel, Rodeo Hawkins and the Daughters of Mayhem. So I will stop talking. Done the introduction. So let's bring him in and find out about him because you know it's a very interesting book, and I want to hear more about John and more about the book. Hello, John.
Yeah. Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me on. This is great. This is great.
So, before we get talking about the book, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
First off, as a reader of cartoons, comics, and then as a creator yourself.
Yeah. So I am. Yeah, I'm a big fan of comics and novels and art in general. But this is my first time writing a book like that. I would say that my real interest as a writer is as a fantasy adventure writer, and in particular writing for an audience. I was in elementary school for a long time. And this is the kind of books that I like to write. I've written primarily the event novels. Rodeo Hawkins and the Daughters of Mayhem is the first graphic novel that I've read or written. Excuse me. Yeah.
So, what do you remember? Maybe the first comic or cartoon that you picked up as a kid and kind of piqued your interest?
Yeah. So I grew up reading. I wasn't one of those readers that like collected a whole bunch of DC and Marvel and that kind of thing. I would pick them up periodically and I would enjoy them. I tended to gravitate more towards just traditional fantasy and science fiction novels. It was more as an adult when I started to really have that passion for reading graphic novels, and a lot of it was kind of as an adult, starting with like kind of discovering a lot of Alan Moore's work and getting into that. But then as someone who writes for that younger audience, discovering just some of the really fantastic graphic novels that have in particular been coming out in the past 10, 20 years, like Lumberjanes and Nimona and Amulet, those kind of graphic novels. Even though Paper Girls isn't quite for that age group, it's a little more for an adult audience. They were just these graphic novels that I just went through this period that I was just consuming so much of them and loving them so much, and had a daughter who at that age was also reading them and tipping me off on a lot of the really good ones that she was enjoying. And so it kind of ignited as that newfound love as an adult reader for them that got me excited to want to try my hand at writing in this creative field.
So we'll come back to your journey here in a second, but tell us a little bit about Rodeo Hawkins and the Daughters of Mayhem and kind of the gist of the story and the characters.
Yeah, so I mean, despite the character Rodeo Hawkins being in the title, the main character of the story is a kid named Sidney Poblocki. And as the story opens, I mean, Sidney's a relatively ordinary kid, although maybe much more tragic kind of background than typical. He feels very unloved, very unwanted. And on the night that the story opens, he is running away from home. He meets up with his one and only friend, his best bud, Walt, out in the dark streets of their little suburban neighborhood, intending to set off together, but Walt just gets cold feet. He can't do it. I mean, he as a kid, has a happy home life, and he just tells Sidney that, I'm sorry, but I just can't do this, man. And so poor Sidney's about to just set off on his own, but he quickly discovers that he's not unwanted. There are in fact two very powerful factions who are after Sidney, and they both arrive on this very night. One of them is a group called the Paladins, these kind of legendary warriors and guardians of the multiverse who have been searching for every kid named Sidney Poblocki. And this Sidney is actually their last Sidney Poblocki. And the other group that has been after Sidney is Rodeo Hawkins and the Daughters of Mayhem. And this is a group of kind of scoundrel girls. They are just, they typically travel around the cosmos, stirring up trouble, getting into mischief, thus the name Daughters of Mayhem. But in this case, they've been investigating this mystery of why the Paladins would be after this seemingly ordinary kid, or these ordinary kids who are all named Sidney Poblocki. So poor Sidney, I mean, he doesn't know. When they all arrive, he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know who to trust, and he just gets pulled into all sorts of misadventures and dangers, and obviously a lot of fun mayhem for the reader. Maybe not for poor Sidney.
Yeah.
But.
So, as you were, how did you go about developing these characters? Is there a little bit of you, or maybe people in them?
Not typically. I don't go that route. I mean, I know that sometimes writers might do that. Maybe there's a little bit of me in Sidney. He's kind of the relatable character, the kind of ordinary, everyday person. I haven't had a whole bunch of misadventures, and until the start of this book, Sidney hasn't either. But for the other characters, because this has a quite an eccentric, kind of wacky cast of characters, and the original idea from the story, funny enough, actually just came from the title itself. I mean, more typically when I'm starting a new project, a new book, it might be the world, the fantastical world that I'm interested in exploring, and that might be the starting place, or maybe a plot idea, a story idea. But so in this case, it felt a little backwards coming up with that title first. But what happened was my daughter, when she was, I guess, first grade, she had to dress up like a vocabulary word for school. And she chose the word catastrophe. And she decked herself out with bandages and a sling she had crutches. I mean, she just looked really cute. And so naturally, as a parent will do, I put it up on Facebook. And then a friend of mine posted a comment and said, "Oh, she looks like a daughter of mayhem." I had no idea what she meant, but something about that phrase, daughter of mayhem, just exploded in my imagination. And all these ideas started coming fast and furious of me wanting to figure out who would the Daughters of Mayhem be? Who would these various characters be? And so filling out this kind of cast of characters, what their motives were, the kind of the humor and adventures that they would get up to. So it was just a fun process figuring out who these characters were.
And while you were writing this, did you become attached to one character in particular, or one that you kind of
I mean, Rodeo
identified with?
I don't identify with Rodeo. I mean, she's so she's a little bit for people that haven't met this character, who is the leader of the Daughters of Mayhem. I mean, she looks like an ordinary kind of scruffy punk rock looking teenage girl, or tween girl, I should say. She's on that end, but she's actually quite a powerful cosmic being. So giving that much power to a tween is a recipe for disaster in the first place. But she was just such a fun character to develop, and part of that vision for her was almost drawing maybe from unintentionally, but I kind of realized after the fact that I think that Peter Pan was a real inspiration. The way Peter Pan is this mischievous leader of the Lost Boys. But in this case, we have Rodeo Hawkins, who's this kind of mischievous leader of this, instead of Lost Boys, it's like this group of scoundrel girls, kind of flipping the gender on it all. Seemed a lot more fun to have a bunch of mischievous girls and this one poor lost boy, Sidney, getting dragged along behind them. But Rodeo for sure was a fun character.
So tell me a little bit about
again?
Yep. Oh no, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished. I started to interrupt you. So tell me a little bit about your the your partner on this who did the art. Did you know her? How did you guys connect, or what drew you to her style of art that made it fit with your work?
Yeah. So Nicole Miles is the illustrator on it, and she's based in the UK. And finding her in this world of with a graphic novel that's intended for this younger audience, you're often the publishers start often with the manuscript, which I sold originally to Holiday House, and I had this fantastic veteran editor there, Margaret Ferguson, who just really had an extraordinary background, especially in doing graphic novels. And so the process was the two of us, once we had really revised and refined the manuscript and got it to a place that we were ready to show it to others, that it was starting to just look for together, kind of looking for who would be that good fit. And so we would go through, the people, a lot of the stories that we had read and artists that we liked, and kind of sharing ideas and bouncing them around back and forth until we finally came across Nicole, and both of us were just like, oh yeah, her kind of simple line work, but the way she can capture these character expressions. She kind of gets the humor that is underlying a lot of what I want to do, as well as the kind of wild world building and fantastical magical elements. I almost kind of think of her a little bit like if I had written a comedy movie, it's only going to be as funny or as interesting as the actor or the comedian who delivers it, the performance. And Nicole, she was that performer, that comedian, that actor. She was the one that was able to bring all these characters to life visually for the reader.
And now, did I hear correctly that this was your first graphic novel experience?
Yes, this is my first graphic novel experience, and in fact, I didn't originally I didn't think it was going to be a graphic novel at all. I initially, when I first started getting those ideas for the Daughters of Mayhem and started to pull together what the story would be with these characters, I thought that I would turn it into a novel, which is what I typically do, is fantasy novels. But I had so many ideas coming so quickly that I wanted to capture it really fast. Sometimes in the past, I'm able to take it slow and let the ideas bake and make notes and develop an outline. But in this case, it was coming so quickly, and it felt like fully developed scenes in my head that I was trying to figure out, like, how can I get this down as quickly as possible, a first draft. And it seemed, just as a kind of experiment, I thought, well, I wonder if I could write it in script format, kind of write it almost like I would do I was almost thinking of it more like a screenplay for a movie, even though I didn't intend it to be that, but just to get it down where it's primarily the dialogue that the characters are saying, all the kind of interesting exchanges between them, and then just quick little notes on the setting or the action, the kind of set pieces or stage directions, if you will. But once I was working on it in that format, it's such a different way of writing than prose and the narration that's involved in writing a novel, that I could quickly see how, this story really wants to be a graphic novel. It really needs that kind of that visual format with the art in the storytelling.
And as a prose writer, what was the learning curve, if there was any, writing, for the panel, layout, that, the graphic novel and, format?
Yeah. So because I didn't have, a whole lot of experience with that in the past, part of the fun for me was just kind of figuring out what would be a good format. And I talked to a lot of other people that I know who do graphic novels, do comics, and I kept hearing, like, everyone has a different style. Some people are very, very much want to dictate panel by panel, page by page. This is exactly what happens. This is what this panel should look like. And other people were a little looser with that. And I felt drawn more towards a looser style, something that could be more collaborative for Nicole or whoever at the time, whoever would wind up being the illustrator, to have that approach of just kind of writing it, but not dictating what the panels would be, not even really describing a whole lot what the character designs would be. I mean, I had images, vivid images in my head, but I was almost approaching it the way I'm a musician also, and I love playing a solo show, just me and my guitar. But I really prefer playing with a full band. I like having that kind of collaborative aspect where we all get to bring ideas to the table. So I wanted to leave as much room as possible in the script for Nicole to do what she does best, and for her to decide what the panel layout would be, the page layouts, the kind of flow of the story in that visual format.
And while you were doing that, did Nicole, being an experienced artist and illustrator, did she come back and say, I think this might work better, or here's what did she give you any tips that you plan on using in the future?
I think that the way it kind of played out with working with her was that I got to realize what her strengths were, what she was really good at doing. And so there would be tweaks that I would make, especially once we started to get early sketches that came in from her and started to get those initial pages, was thinking about how, we might want to make this kind of tweak to this character or this aspect of the story to change the setting because she's really good at X, Y, and Z with this kind of thing. So, and then certainly writing, so the sequel comes out next year, Rodeo Hawkins and the Sons of Disaster. So getting to start on that one, knowing that Nicole was going to be the person doing it, allowed me to kind of write the story to ideally to play to her strengths in it. But in terms of us all kind of discussing things, certainly, an interesting part was my editor and Margaret and Ferguson and Nicole and I just throughout that process of going from sketches to final art, all kind of putting our heads together on the changes and the tweaks and how to refine the story to get it just right.
So you said that you were a school teacher, or was.
Yeah.
Did that
Was, yeah.
how did that experience, if any, enable you to, did you apply to this book and your other work?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, because in a way, when you're writing for that younger audience, you're not writing for you. I mean, in a way, you're not writing for yourself as an adult. I'm always writing these stories that just fill my imagination and are fun for me to tell. These are the stories I really want to work on, but I also know that the audience is quite different from me. It's a younger person. It's usually 11, 12-year-old who they're at a different place. Their interests in things they're not adult interests. So, that they're very particular to the world of childhood, the world of kids. And so being a classroom teacher really gave me a front row seat to spending all that time with so many kids over the years and getting to know their personalities and the way they think and their humor style, the stuff that can be anxieties for them, the things that are kind of interesting to explore characters going through that in stories, as well as their kind of wants and dreams and hopes and those kind of things too, that are very particular to those of a child.
Now, do you have a favorite part of the book, or one that speaks to you more? I mean, I know it's your book, so definitely you're speaking through it. But is there a part of the book that really speaks to you, or you hope speaks to other people?
Yeah. I mean, in the end, this isn't a deep philosophical book. It's just meant to be. It's meant to be a lot of fun for the reader. Whether it's a young reader or an adult reader, because I think there's a lot of adult readers who are going to have a great time with this book. So for fun in the storytelling is always foremost for me in it. And I would say that there's a part of the story, and this isn't really a spoiler, but kind of midway through the story, there was a very particular scene that I thought was so fun to write, as well as every time I came back to revisions, it was just fun, and I would kind of laugh at it, especially once I got to see how Nicole was fleshing out visually. But it's a moment when Rodeo Hawkins is they're still trying to figure out why the Paladins would be after Sidney Poblocki. And so she has to take Sidney to go gather some clues. But in typical Rodeo Hawkins format, she doesn't explain herself ahead of time, what she's planning on doing, what she needs Sidney to do. She gives him very loose instructions. And a lot of times they're very kind of, they don't make a whole lot of sense in the moment, especially for Sidney and the reader. And there's a funny scene, I think, where Sidney gives Rodeo this old ugly baby doll and then sends him into this biker, it looks like this Mad Max style off-world biker bar with all these strange creatures and tough characters. And she says, go up to the bartender there and demand a cherry vanilla Coke from him. And and Sidney doesn't know why she's asking him to do this. It sounds super dangerous, but he goes in anyway, and it just turns into like it kind of captures the mayhem and mischief and all the silliness and excitement that I think I wanted to load this book full of. But that particular scene is one that I always thought was my favorite.
Well, you can't go wrong with a big guy with a claw hook and a chainsaw. So.
No kidding. Chainsaws are always funny. Claw hook hands, they're funny. Yeah.
So, as a writer, who inspires you, or whose work do you kind of look at and say, I don't want to. I'm not looking to copy them, but I like what they're doing. I like the way they present stuff, and it pushes you to up your game, I guess.
Oh, yeah. No, I think we have to be honest as artists and creators that we all take inspiration from certain people. I mean, we should, and it's not stealing. It's really just, it's the way we learn our craft is through that. And I find it very helpful to really think about, like, there are stories that I might read and I might really love them. I loved those like Philip Pullman fantasy series, his Dark Materials, but my style of writing is not a Philip Pullman style of writing. And I can love him, but it doesn't mean that I always draw quite as much inspiration. Maybe some of the world building aspects I'll draw from him, but other writers who I think I really kind of draw, I'll maybe kind of really think about their craft, what they're doing, how they're making a scene, how they're delivering lines. Jonathan Stroud, as a novel writer, is a British writer who did the Lockwood and Company series. He's someone that his style is one that I really kind of gravitate towards. And then in the graphic novel world, Ian Stevenson, who did those Lumberjane books, and in particular the Nimona graphic novel, is one that I really love their style of writing and world building. That just nice balance of exciting things happening, weird things happening, but also that kind of humor and heart that's at play as well.
And I know you mentioned that there's another book coming out next year. Rodeo Hawkins and the Sons of Disaster. Is this going to be like a ongoing, or is it a finite story that you want to tell? Using these characters,
no, the kind of vision. Yeah, in some of my novels, I've written a true trilogy where it might be multiple books, but it continues one overarching story arc. But this is not the case. The Rodeo Hawkins books are very episodic. They're ones that you can just kind of dive into any of them. So the idea is, you can kind of continue with these episodic adventures. Each book becomes a different one. If readers started with Rodeo Hawkins and the Sons of Disaster, which comes out next year, I don't think they'll get too lost. They'll catch up quickly on who the characters are and the setup from it. But otherwise, yeah, they're meant to be those kind of books that you can kind of enjoy almost in any order. Although there will be, of course, some threads that kind of run through them that develop the characters and their relationships.
What is the biggest lesson you feel that you learned, in the process of writing this graphic novel that, maybe you've already used, for book two?
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's such a great question. And one I haven't been asked before, and something interesting to think about. Yeah, like what is that big takeaway from it? But I think a big part of it is that I realized, and maybe I kind of already knew this, but this story kind of helped me to develop it even more, to think about it even more, is that you can, even though there's a lot of fun world building in Rodeo Hawkins and the Daughters of Mayhem, and a lot of people who are fantasy fans go in just loving the weirdness and the oddity of this other world and figuring it out. But for readers to stay invested, they really have to be emotionally committed in the characters. They have to just really like these characters and want to keep. It's not just about how the plot will play out for them, but they just enjoy being with these characters in the moment. And so it's almost making sure that each moment in the story is entertaining and interesting on its own without it needing to rely necessarily on the plot or the world building to deliver what makes for the satisfying story.
So is there anything else you wanted to mention that maybe we didn't cover about the book or yourself or?
Well, I mean, I just think that it's as this has been such a great joy to get to do this book, because as a creative person, I like trying new things. And, I'm not the kind of person who just wants to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I've loved writing fantasy novels, but right now this has been such a fun new space to play in as a creative person, as an artist, is continuing to think about and the kind of, and just how comics and sequential art fits into the whole world of literature and storytelling. Just I look forward to continuing to play with that. And I would say the other piece of it too that's been really fun is, as you're an artist like I am, you a working artist, you often have something else as your side gig. And for me, I've been really lucky. Even though I'm no longer in the classroom teaching elementary school kids, I do a lot of teaching and working with young writers, but primarily adult writers at this stage. And so I love getting to lead writing workshops and teach online classes, and just find that world of teaching storytelling, teaching fiction writing, no matter what type it is, very creative and very fun. So it's been fun to have both these sides of my life.
And I meant to ask this earlier, but is there anything that, as you said, you're a musician, is there anything that you kind of brought in from the musician side of yourself that you brought into this writing, or are they kind of? I don't want to say separate, but
it's funny. They kind of they certainly kind of work different sides of my imagination and all that inevitably there's going to be things that will overlap. I mean, I guess you can see on my wall here in the back, I got a fiddle and I have a banjo. So a lot of my, even though I grew up loving like a lot of punk rock and all that, and at this stage in my life, I'm really into kind of old American music, blues and folk and old country and stuff like that. I don't know. The world of Rodeo Hawkins is not quite that kind of world, but it must have, a lot of those old songs have like, are weird, like, and they tell kind of weird stories often and have weird characters and weird locations. And so that kind of fun weirdness, I'm sure, comes into like how I develop my world building. In particular, I've done books in the past that have been more explicitly drawn on this old-timey America. Rodeo Hawkins has been a chance to kind of go in a different direction.
So if you had to compare Rodeo Hawkins to a music style.
Oh yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, well, because like Instagram nowadays, you have to, a lot of times you get that option of kind of adding a song to it. So I have been thinking about that. Like, what are the songs that need to go along when I put up something? And, like Bikini Kill, it's like 90s kind of punk bands that are like, women fronted punk bands. I loved them back in the 90s and still love them. So I've been kind of going towards Rebel Girl by Bikini Kill and putting that up sometimes on my posts. So if you haven't heard Bikini Kill, you can go check out one of my posts and hear that. But that kind of punk energy is certainly a big part of this world and these characters.
So as we kind of wrap up here, why do you want to give like a pitch for the book? Let us know when it comes out and where people can find you online and check out your Instagram.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I am on Instagram, on Facebook, and my website, johnclaudebemis.com. And there's often links off of those for where you can order the book. But the book comes out September 11th. Rodeo Hawkins and the Daughters of Mayhem. This fun interdimensional adventure with all these wacky characters, and in particular the kind of yin yang of Rodeo Hawkins and all her kind of comic glory and versus poor Sidney Poblocki, who is this character that can tug on our heartstrings and we sympathize for because he gets pulled into a whole lot of trouble. So, just as much trouble from the bad guys as the good guys. So.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to chat, and maybe when the next book comes out, we can chat again. We'll find out about that book and how this one, was received, and more about what's going on in your creative career.
Yeah, I would love that, Chad. Yeah, we'll talk about Rodeo Hawkins and the Sons of Disaster next year.
All righty. Well, I want to thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day. And everybody, definitely check out the book when it's available. And I will say, I took it with me this past weekend while we were camping, and I read it out. It was a nice read to sit in the hammock and just kind of read.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thanks, and have a great day.
Thanks. You too.